Well, hello, that's me again. Today is March 30th, and let's talk about some things which really make the huge difference in our global world, so to speak. And for anybody who has internet and mouse and keyboard and computer, they can easily see, especially when they go over the non-Western mass media, and even Western mass media do report it somewhat. They hide it in the cellar of their reports or news reporting. But the point is that when you look at what is happening in terms of the de-dollarization in the last week or so, it is absolutely astonishing, if not to say sensational. It's earth-shaking. I knew that the dollarization was coming, it was in the process, but the speed, the way it picked up the speed, so it's exponential actually. And we already have the situation with, for example, France buying liquefied natural gas from China. Guess whose gas is that? For yuans, now we have Saudi Arabia joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and now the Asian central banks, the chiefs of the central banks of Asia, and that means, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, what have you. They have the meeting coming soon, and guess what they will be discussing? A complete de-dollarization, complete refusal to use dollar, euro, and Japanese yen. I mean, it's just stunning, to be frank with you. And again, this is the strategy, and it has everything to do with the special military operation and sanctions and the way Russia stood alone initially against the combined West and stood against it very successfully. And now we're gonna go and explain. I'm going to explain, but we will do this journey together. It's the situation with the strategy. My fourth book elaborates a lot about strategy, and it is absolutely justified and prudent to state today that combined West cannot do strategy. They just can't. I mean, and it is absolute fact of life. It is cold hard fact of life. There are no Russia experts anywhere in the intellectual or political and military structures in the combined West. People who pass there for experts, they are morons, basically. And I mean, I'm on record, make no mistake, I spoke about many times, and primarily what they have, they are shysters. They are everywhere. Those shysters are in the think tanks, all kinds of the orgs, of all kinds of NGOs, and there are shysters in the governments. They have no clue what they're dealing with. And as de-dollarization shows it dramatically, and the way it, again, it accelerated to such a degree, I was expecting it within like 2-3 years. We're having it now. It is happening. And probably by the end of the year, we will not recognize the financial landscape of this world because it's gonna lack dollar as the main reserve currency, but that is a whole other story. So now about the strategy. And very good friend of mine, he is one of my supporters, but he also posts a lot. He wrote to me yesterday, and he has a great insight in this. He's a very good thinker. He says, you know what, I'm beginning to arrive to the conclusion that basically what Russia is doing, it was from the get-go planned like this to to do the attrition of just about anything, be that Ukrainian forces which are basically depleted, or be that of course NATO. It was a deliberate, we can say absolutely clearly now, this was the plan from the get-go until the battlefield was shaped, the traps were set, and we have Bakhmut, we have Avdiivka, we know that they have their underground tunnels from Chasov Yar, which is about a few kilometers away from Bakhmut. This is the only lifeline they have. They're supplying some kind of ammo. And when you look at this, it's just like, oh my gosh. And suddenly, after all this fuss, make no mistake, China is Russia's ally, and they are neighbors, they are good friends in many respects. But when you see that Chinese peace plan, we don't know what it was. I mean, we can go sit here and speculate whatever we want, but here's yesterday, Mr. Peskov, official voice of Kremlin, and he states this thing that, which is, what can I say? Kremlin sees only military solution to Ukraine conflict. The ongoing hybrid war between Russia and its adversaries is set to go on for a long time, Putin's spokesman has claimed. And look at this. There is no political or diplomatic solution to the ongoing conflict with Ukraine at the moment. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has insisted. He added that Moscow regrets other avenues for resolution are not open. In other words, Russia will continue to do what it is doing, and that means annihilating in the industrial quantities both remnants of SOU, and we are talking about remnants, and everything the West throws at Ukraine, including the personnel. There is a whole other story about this. But to demonstrate what is going on in this respect, even Zelensky now, and this is actually don't pay attention to the fact that it is Daily Mail, it was reported by Associated Press, not that it is much better than British tabloids, they all are, from CNN to Washington Post to Wall Street Journal, but look at this. President Zelensky yesterday admits he will be under pressure to compromise with Putin if Russian forces take the city of Bakhmut, as Ukrainians start to feel tired after years of war. It's basically stupid kindergarten level, elaboration, if you wish, on the issue of Bakhmut, which is for all intents and purposes already fallen, and basically the Russian armed forces and Wagner group are cleaning, so to speak, the western outskirts of the city. And evidently the realization of the catastrophe which unfolded, not just Ukraine, but NATO, begins to dawn on those people. And you can listen to excellent podcast yesterday with Judging Freedom with Judge Napolitano and my friend Larry Johnson. Larry makes some outstanding points there regarding the situation with, strategic miscalculation by combined West. They just don't do strategy. They don't know what it is. They don't understand how to apply it. They love to use terms. They love those big words, like structure, geopolitics, strategy. They don't know what it is. And good God, if you needed to understand how far the United States Armed Forces fell, well, here we are. Mr. Milley, Mark Milley, General, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified yesterday in the House Armed Services Committee, and look what he says. He says this. After obviously the usual tropes about United States military being the greatest fighting force and the most lethal and capable military in the world, he states that the war with China and Russia not inevitable. Now, here what he says. For the first time, the United States is facing two major nuclear powers whose vital national security interests are in competition with the US. Both China and Russia have the means to threaten US national security, he said, but war with either is neither inevitable nor imminent. Well, it's good. I mean, listen, it was Milley who stated for a couple years ago, I believe he said, that we don't have to be enemies, we can be competitors. Hey, I applaud this. I'm for it with my both hands and my both legs, actually. But the point is, Here's Millie makes the funny thing. Fighting a war with Russia and China simultaneously would be very difficult, he added. Well, he forgot, of course, to mention that United States cannot fight even a single war against such enemy as Russia because it will sustain catastrophic defeat and catastrophic losses. But hey, he needs to kind of, placate all those guys in the House Armed Services Committee. And he continues there with the statements like this. A high state of readiness, when he repeats it, and modernization will deter aggression, and the fiscal year 2024 budget request of $842 billion will ensure that the joint force remains the most lethal and capable military in the world, he said. No, United States is not the most capable military in the world. It has an excellent submarine force. It has a large air force, which never fought a real war. And other than that, I mean, we have some issues to discuss here. And let me start with this piece of news, basically, which I wanted to elaborate on a little bit today. And this is this wonderful issue of military porn. And here it is. And look, it's just very funny. We have defense news, breaking defense, all kinds of those military porn news channels. They report not yesterday, 2 days ago, that ARRW hypersonic missile test failed, U.S. Air Force admits. And you can see this B-52, which carries this ARRV hypersonic missile, and this comes on the heels of the previous, very kind of, good feeling reports about the fact that actually the program was proceeding really well. Well, it's not. And here it is. Frank Kendall indicated the Lockheed Martin made AGM 183A, which is Air Launch Rapid Response Weapon. That's where ARRW comes from. Program may be in jeopardy. The service, he said, is more committed to HASM, the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, the service's other major hypersonic weapon program. And at this point in time, we are to ARRW. Wow, what happened? They suddenly are committed to something else. And he says that they probably will do a couple more tests, after this failed test, but it is just about the situation that they need to finish off, and probably spend those money which have been allotted for this. Then here there is an explanation there with that China and Russia have invested considerable resources in developing these weapons for their militaries, and several U.S. lawmakers have expressed concern that the country is not doing enough to field its own hypersonic capabilities. Let me explain again. The problem is not just with hypersonic missiles here, and the problem is much deeper. Just to give you the feel of it, look at this. Now we have the issue not just with those hypersonic weapons which the United States still cannot deploy. And remember those, celebratory reports 2 years ago about the Dark Eagle, this Mach 17 thing has landed. Well, what landed were which is transport launch containers. The missile itself still not deployed. They say they tested, but evidently the latest news are that they have issues with it too. But now we have this other thing. And this is just absolutely astonishing. Northrop $96 billion nuclear missile risks delays. The U.S. Air Force finds, and we can see that United States doesn't have just the issues with the hypersonic weapons. Eventually, the United States will be able to develop some kind of glider and will be able to deploy it. It will not develop, evidently, anything comparable to Kinzhal, let alone Zircon, because the only country which has the real 3M22 Zircon, that truly dedicated anti-shipping missile is Russia. It's an all-power flight from point A to point B. But look what they now report about their ballistic missiles. The $96 billion Sentinel intercontinental ballistic missiles by Northrop Grumman may miss its goal of initial deployment in May 2029 as much as 2 years, and you already know where it is all going. Along the causes cited, and guess what? A shortage of skilled engineers and supply chain problem. The potential delays haven't been previously disclosed. This is sensational, guys. And here we have to understand what we're talking about. Now, they talk about the lack of engineers. Yeah, United States is ongoing. The same actually with the West. When you have too many economists, lawyers, political scientists, journalists, and politicians, that's what you get. You lose their very competent labor force, which, by the way, Trump's 2018 report, which you can easily find, about the preservation of the military-industrial, in general, industrial base of the United States already warned. United States was basically disintegrating industrially, especially in military-industrial complex. And now what we have? There is no Kinjal analog for the United States. It just failed. Whatever the hypersonic will come through, we don't know. And whenever, years away, and I don't think so United States will be able to repeat anything similar to Zircon, pardon me. And now we have the situation with the ballistic missile, and now we have the situation with the Columbia, which is actually a necessary change. United States needs to update, objectively speaking, as the great power, United States needs to update its nuclear deterrent. And we have the situation with inability to properly deploying and build the Columbia strategic missile submarine, the new one, which goes for, which will be the substitution, basically, taking place instead of the nearing obsolescence of higher class submarines. And here we have this zero hedge lament when they talk about this. Obviously, reporting about the failure of this AGM 183 or whatever the name of this. Look at this. They arrived to the thing about which I write books. It is indeed embarrassing that the United States, the largest military budget in the world, has yet to field any hypersonic missiles, while Russia has already used its hypersonic Kinjal missiles multiple times in the conflict in Ukraine. Yes, it's absolutely true. Russia uses the Kinjal and other hypersonic means actually to a dramatic effect in Ukraine in the last year, and evidently Kinjal has a reputation now as a very mature and extremely deadly missile system. And as the result, we have the repetition of this. At first, it was kind of like a rumor. But now there is this funny Greek media outlet which reports about the fact that Kinjal indeed was used recently. And you remember on the 7th, Russia used the launch of 6 of them and indeed penetrated 120 meters off the ground and blew out the communication and planning center with the dozens of the NATO officers, primarily British and Polish, apart from the Ukrainian officers. Now, I cannot vouch for the veracity of these reports, but evidently this time, unlike it was the first round of those rumors, and many of me and my colleagues, we thought, maybe it's rumors. Well, evidently, Российская Gazeta, which is the major Russian official outlet, picked up on the story and reported on it. So, maybe it was true, but it doesn't matter in any respect. Kinjal is an outstanding weapon system, and again, there's nothing out there in the world like this, and it's not going to be there for a long time. And there are other things which, when Zero Hedge asks how this all happened, that United States fell behind. Let me show you something. I know when it started. Let's open the great late Admiral Zumwalt, the chief of naval operations, memoirs, which were written in 1974. And look what it is. Here is the genesis of it. Here is the end of 60s, and read this. When it came to weapons, all of us who worked on Project 60 felt strongly that the most urgent task by far was to develop and deploy a proper cruise missile as rapidly as possible in surface vessels, particularly escorts, first, then as soon thereafter as possible in planes and submarines. To my mind, the Navy's dropping in 1950s of a promising program for a cruise missile called Regulars was the single worst decision about weapons it made during my years in service. That decision was based on the theory that our carriers were so effective that we did not need cruise missiles, though some have suspected that the reluctance of the Aviators Union to give up any portion of its jurisdiction played a large part in the decision. In any case, without cruise missiles, particularly all our long-range offensive capability was crowded onto the deck of a few carriers. Even those pets of recovers, the enormously expensive nuclear-propelled guided missile frigates remained almost purely defensive ships without cruise missiles. It was another case of numbers being more to the point than quality. Fortunately, when I was heading the Division of Systems Analysis, the Secretary of the Navy had in effect rescinded the Regular's decision by directing my office to do a study that would lead to a program for a new cruise missile, Harpoon. The most significant string attached to this order was the verbal message relayed to me through the aid system that the missile was to have a range of no more than 50 miles if it was to be accepted to the Chief of Naval Operations. Evidently, the Aviators Union was still nervous about its prerogatives. In other words, over-reliance on the whole idea of the aircraft carriers as the main power projection tool and the main fighter unit, so to speak, or component of the Navy that, you know, aviation will do the trick, while those poor Russians were dealing with the developing of those missiles from the get-go, was actually met typically with the typical strategic miscalculation, as it was done with the special military operation on the western part, who do not have plans A, B, or what have you, and obviously they cannot do strategy. And fact is, I will tell you more, they cannot do doctrine either. But the point was that, yeah, so here are our, you know, aircraft carriers, so we can do whatever we want, and nothing comes close to us. Okay, that's fine. Russians didn't want to do the carriers. They didn't have at that time, late 50s, early 60s, the means to do that. And guess what were Russians doing? Let me show you something. This is the list. It's just partial list. Partial. You can scroll below, but you will be getting into 1980s. This is the list from 1950s to 1970s of Russian development, that varieties of the anti-shipping and cruise missiles and just cruise missiles. And when you look at this, it is absolutely astonishing how much Russians developed at that time, from be that venerable P-15 Termite, which is of course is a son to a Styx known in NATO, and this is 1950s technology, to all kind down to things which were becoming increasingly faster and longer range, until Russians developed the first ever submarine launched cruise missile, which was called P-70 Amethyst, and then of course its much more developed version of P-120 Malachite. And when you look at this, in 1975 Russians deployed this. And again, I do it just, from the point of view of Wikipedia, because actually Wikipedia is not lying here. Look at this. What was this missile, P-500 Basalt? Attentively look at the years of the introduction into the full deployment, not IOC. IOC was already in early 70s. In 1975, it officially went onto the submarines and especially surface ships. as P500 Basalt, and look at the tactical characteristics of this missile, obviously, and its later version P1000 Vulcan. As you can see yourself, it had the range of 550 kilometers, and it had the speed of Mach 3 plus. If you look attentively, at that time there was no defense, there was nothing you could stop it with, and obviously then there was the development of the anti-shipping cruise missiles, a huge variety of them, be them those Ha-22 and then earlier Ha-32, which are very high supersonic missiles, Mach 2.5, 3, some of them Mach 3.5 up to 4. For example, Novadays X-22 and X-32, it has the speed of Mach 4.2, 4.5. It is almost on the verge of the hypersonic flight. And we're not talking about Zircon and Kinjal, which are absolutely genuine and absolutely astonishing hypersonic weapons. And when you look at this, you have to understand, the United States never had a supersonic cruise missile. I'm not talking about some kind of the drones or what have you. United States tried to develop the supersonic Mach 1.5, Mach 2.5 missile. It turned out to be worth its weight in gold, and of course the program was abandoned. And since then, you look at it, good old Harpoon, which is the product of 1960s, and of course Tomahawk. And Tomahawk initially was conceived as the long-range anti-shipping missile, and as you all know, it became primarily Tomahawk land attack missile. They can still reconfigure it to a certain degree into anti-shipping missile, but even Tomahawk is old. It's old and becoming obsolete. Next thing is JASSM. This is, seemingly impressive missile, especially when the JASSM R or X, what have you, comes online, which is 1900 kilometers. That's important. But again, these are still subsonic missiles. That means you have more reaction time for the advanced air defense complexes, and most of those advanced air defense complexes operate today almost in the robotic manner with the elements of the artificial intellect, and they react really fast. Enough to take a look at Russian Parliamentary Dud, which has its land-based version, which is S-350 Vitis, and when you look S-500 is a robot, basically, so, and when you look at those things, that, yeah, sure, yeah. But here to demonstrate to you what is very important and happens each day, basically, and each day Russian air defense in the special military operations zone along this 1,000 plus kilometers long front catches a huge number of all those missiles, even shells, from launched from Ukrainian side, including obviously those HIMARS, which completely discredited as the viable and effective weapon system, as pretty much anything have been done. And while as this Greek portal reports that those NASAM and IRIS system couldn't stop Kinjal, yeah, nothing can stop Kinjal, really, just read my lips, let alone stop Zircon. And of course those dozens of the officers of NATO officers have been obliterated. Look at this, today's news. And again, this is very important, and people say, oh yeah, let's kind of skip over it. No, this is huge. Today Russian Ministry of Defense reports for the first time that Ukraine, Armed Forces of Ukraine used they have only 2 launch systems of their latest, it was not that latest, but I mean, it's been in the development throughout 2010s. The new Ukrainian missile called Grom Thunder 2. What is Grom 2? Grom 2 is a poor man's Iskander. It has the range of 500 kilometers, and it is hypersonic on its, as well as the Iskander. How much better than it is Iskander? No, it's not better than Iskander. Iskander is a much more advanced and developed system, but still, 500 kilometers, yeah, it's have been confirmed. And guess what? Russians shut it down because they launched one. And guess what? By what did they shoot it down? And this is the most stunning thing. It was shot down by Tor M2. So make own conclusion what Tor M2 is. It's essentially ground troops, what is called the Army Air Defense, although the Army Air Defense is going to be incorporated back into the VKS airspace forces of Russia. And this is the air defense complex which wasn't supposed to do those things, but guess what? It does. And so it's now shoots down the basically hypersonic targets. This is sensational. And you know why it is important? Because all kinds of the Panzer, which by the way also shoots down HIMARS quite well. When you look at this, these are systems which are also being navalized and being installed on the Russian surface ships as the secondary air defense complexes. So that tells you what a huge gap in the rocketry already exists between Russia and the United States. And this gap only grows. And this is what actually underscores the whole situation, projects itself. It's a microcosm of a larger systemic collapse of the West, which we observe today. And as I already stated, some people say, why this de-dollarization happens? Everybody say, look at Russia. She was sanctioned, to hell, but as it turned out, it was West which was sanctioning itself. Russia is doing fine. So, and when you look at this, my God, how could you miscalculate like this militarily, economically, politically? And I can tell you only one thing. I repeat it non-stop, and I'll continue to repeat it. They are that incompetent. They are that delusional. They don't know the world outside. They don't understand how it works. And as I already stated, as Margarita Simonyan she wrote a few years ago during the elections of Vladimir Putin, she stated that all your Russia, just fire all those Russian experts. When she addressed her, it was addressed to the West political elites, and she said, fire those parasites. They're not really experts. Hire normal experts about Russia. Because if they had the real experts on Russia, they wouldn't commit themselves. Well, it's basically a suicidal trip. There is no coming back from it. And we have to wait and see where it all goes. But what I know, by the end of this year, if we survive and the Third World War doesn't start in earnest, if the hybrid war will continue, we will see a complete obliteration of the financial order as it existed before. And what we see here, Russia is doing her attrition thing. And the United States, neither West, neither cannot fight real attrition. And that is simple as that. They should have studied strategy, of course, real study and real history. So this is my talk to you guys today, and I want to express my profound gratitude for my wonderful supporters who help me to do what I'm doing. And as always, if you like what I do, subscribe to my channel and support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee too. So this is it for today, and I hope you have a nice rest of the week for yourself. Bye-bye.